Hello, and welcome back to the next episode of our Safer Stalking Action Month podcast series. Today we have the Events and Outreach intern team, and we're going to be discussing our takeaways from the recent community panel where we had representatives from different community partners, both from Cal Poly and the Greater SLO community. The partners at our podcast were a representative from Cal Poly Safer, the Office of Student Rights and Responsibilities, the Cal Poly Police Department, and Lumina Alliance.
On our panel, the first question that we asked our panelists was about their organization's definition of stalking. So from SAFER, we talked about how their definition is pretty broad in that they describe it as any sort of behavior directed at a person that causes them to fear for their safety or cause them a significant level of distress. Kara, the representative from SAFER, explained that SAFER's definition is broad because it's important that we believe survivors and that we guide people in their healing journey. Next, we had Caitlin from the Office of Student Rights and Responsibilities talk about their definition as being engaged in repeated course of conduct directed at a specific person that would cause a reasonable person to fear for their safety of themselves or others, or experience some sort of distress. And their definition is really consistent with Executive Order 1097 from the Chancellor's Office and is compliant with state and federal laws, such as Title IX. Beyond this, Jeffrey from the Cal Poly Police Department talked about, how their definition of stalking follows the criminal section about any person who willfully and maliciously, follows or pursues somebody. And the key of the police definition is that there must be some sort of credible threat that puts someone in sustained fear. And then finally, Esther from the Lumina Alliance talked about how their definition more closely aligns to SAFER's, and that we also have to consider how stalking has secondhand effects on friends and family. And so it was interesting to learn about all these organizations' different definitions because it led into our conversation about how they respond to stalking and support survivors.
Responds to reports in a sort of different way. SAFER really emphasized that they don't necessarily respond to reports, but rather they receive disclosures. And this change of language is because SAFER is a confidential resource. So a report would refer more to the Office of Student Rights and Responsibilities or the Cal Poly Police Department, but disclosures for SAFER are confidential, and with those, they work to validate the experiences of survivors, ensure their immediate safety and pursue safety planning, and interrupt the internal narrative that what they have experienced is not serious because it is and valid. Lumina Alliance also really emphasizes that survivors need to be listened to, believed, validated, and just helped through understanding their experience. And then the Office of Student Rights and Responsibilities, when they receive a report, they make sure that the person understands their rights and how to access other resources. They make sure that this person knows the definition of stalking, but they make sure not to minimize or invalidate their experience. And they always connect them with SAFER, just because SAFER has those extra resources of crisis counseling and the advocacy for every step of the way. And the police department really considers if it is a criminal act or not. And if it is deemed criminal, they might be referred to court to work for a restraining order. There might be an investigation or an arrest as needed. If it is non-criminal, they would be referred to the Office of Student Rights and Responsibilities or other campus resources such as SAFER or the health center.
The next topic that we discussed on our panel was how we can work towards prevention before the harm is ever committed. A lot of the campus partners agreed that it was really important to have relationships with other partners on campus to really collaborate and put their efforts together. The representative from SAFER really valued the power of affecting people's hearts and minds and changing how we view care and love towards one another, and that creating building blocks should start far earlier than college campuses so that violence never occurs. People from the Office of Students' Rights and Responsibilities also agreed with this, that education was key because people don't really know what stalking behaviors fall under. So it's hard to really find the populations that are experiencing stalking that need support. From campus police, there were many forms of prevention that are available to students. Mustang Patrol and the shuttle and risk patrols and dorms in the library are all in place to help students feel safer. It was really interesting to learn from Lumina Alliance about all the ways that they do grassroots efforts to end violence. For instance, they shared that they have a new program called the Teen Minecraft Club for students in middle school and high school to empower youth to be role models in healthy relationships and gain knowledge to be free of violence. They also had a lot of community-based programs and presentations. On the panel, we also discussed ways that we could prevent violence on a societal level, and that opened up a really interesting conversation about education to the youth and just making these issues aware to people at a young age.
Something that was asked to our panelists at the end was, how young is too young, or is it never too early to start? Obviously, these topics can be challenging to grapple with and to accept, and it's not always easy to talk about it. But our panelists agreed that it is never too early to start discussing these topics in an age-appropriate way. To me, this means we're not going to use scare tactics or share complicated, scary statistics to young children because that wouldn't be age appropriate. But there are ways that we can discuss consent and healthy relationships and fostering empathy and love and care for one another to have these foundations and building blocks that we can build upon as children grow.
So after thinking about, the organization's definitions of stalking and the things that they do to respond to stalking, we asked each organization to talk about what they could do better in terms of stalking prevention and survivor support. So our representative from SAFER, Kara, talked about, investing more resources into true primary prevention, right? Thinking about stopping violence before it ever even occurs. And sort of integral to that vision of true primary prevention is a focus on intersectionality and uplifting the voices of marginalized students who, as we know, at our predominantly white institution, feel a lack of belonging and feel targeted. And so our understanding of, diversity, equity, inclusion can't just be abstractions. They need to be embedded in everything that our university does. And SAFER is already leading the forefront of that. And so just continuing our work and making sure that those values are upheld is what we can do better as an organization. And then Caitlin from the Office of Student Rights and Responsibilities talked about how their organization really needs to make sure that they're reaching every community of students so that, there's broader education about this issue. And then finally, their main goal is always to help people know their rights and resources. And so just continuing, living up to that goal. And then Jeffrey from the police department talked about, having better tertiary care, following through with you know, victims of stalking after it occurs, and sort of building like a community network in which we're all working together to prevent stalking. And he really emphasized the importance of meetings and panels like this, so that we can really engage in conversation about prevention of stalking. And then finally, Esther really echoed all of these responses and particularly focused on building educational resources for Spanish speaking communities and Indigenous communities. Her focus was really on how everyone needs to be included in the conversation so that we can truly prevent stalking.
We wanted to express our gratitude to all of the community partners for participating in our panel and joining in conversation and community. And thank you everyone who's been listening and following along with our events for the month.
We still have 2 more events left in January Stalking Action Month. Next week on Wednesday, we have a booth in the University Union about online dating. And on Thursday, our keynote speaker, Adam Dodge, will talk about stalking in the digital age. To learn more about these events and register for the keynote, you can go to safer.calpoly.edu/JanSam. That's JANSAM. Hope to see you there, and thank you for listening.